everybody, I'm Abe, and I'm hosting the episode of Movies and Stuff this week. Your normal host, Dan, is off globetrotting, and we'll be back next week. And, Marty's a Jets fan. We got ourselves a bona fide cast of ne'er-do-wells today. Leah.
Hello.
Tom.
Hello.
And Talia. Finally, I get to do a show with Talia.
Hi.
Hey. So today we're going to do the most retro review ever on Movies and Stuff. We're going to do the Magnificent Ambersons. But before we get into it, I kind of want to lay it out real quick. The prodigy, the chosen son, Orson Welles, who was dominating New York in the theater scene and a household name on the radio. He went to Hollywood when RKO gave him a hell of a deal, gave him final cut and total autonomy to make his first movie, Citizen Kane. Now, Kane commercially was not a success. Critically, it was a success. I mean, they didn't know at the time that they had just seen one of the greatest movies ever, but it was nominated for an Academy Award, with Welles being the youngest person at the time, and for several decades after, being the youngest person ever at 26. So now this is where we are, and this is what fascinates me. You've just done something like this. You've achieved this tremendous amount of success. What do you do for an encore? And Orson Welles decided to do for an encore, after all this, Magnificent Ambersons. And that's exactly what we're talking about tonight. So before we jump into the movie, I kind of want to know what your exposure level with this was. Tom, had you seen Ambersons before?
Yes, I'd seen it before. Is that all you want, or should I talk more?
Hey, you talk more.
Okay. Yeah, I'd seen it before. I like it. It's I think I probably sought it out. I think I'd seen Royal Tenenbaums first, and that was when I then went back because I was a big Royal Tenenbaums fan. And obviously, there's the connection with the title there, and among other things. And so I had seen it. I hadn't seen it for a few years. I like it, but it's not one I return too much. But that was my exposure level.
Yeah. Talia, you had not seen it before, right? Or had you?
No, I saw the remake.
Yeah.
It was a TV movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. Yeah, and then I saw this one today.
Top shelf actors.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, because I thought Orson Welles was going to be in it, but he wasn't. He just directed it. So I was like, okay, because I'm familiar with Citizen Kane. Yeah, and I'm familiar with some of his work, and I love his interview he did with Dick Cavett back in he goes really in depth about his life. I was like, wow, what an interesting person. So yeah, but this is a movie that I find I guess I'm sort of split in the middle about it.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely ask about that. But Leah, had you seen Tannenbaums? Jesus Christ. Had you seen Ambersons before?
No, this was my first experience with the Magnificent Ambersons, as it was with Chris's first experience as well.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Oh, good, Chris. Good. No, we'll get your feedback too there. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat with a lot of you. I've seen Kane more times than I can count, but this is only like the third time I think I've ever seen Ambersons. Personally, I can't say I think I like it better than Kane in any way, but I still think it's a great movie, even if the second half kind of loses its steam a little bit. The thing that strikes me about this is it's a boy taking all the toys out of the toy box and wanting to play with all of them, and I think Ambersons is a little bit more of a guy that's more sure of himself. He's not going to play with all his toys, but he's going to use them specifically in ways. And I got to admit, I do love Ambersons. So let's just get this out of the way. Let's get our opinions of Ambersons out of the way. Tom, are you a fan of Ambersons?
Yeah, I think it's a good movie. I think it's very interesting in the way that it's approached. I love the tone. I love the way that he shoots it. I think the problem is it's just hard to watch it and not see Citizen Kane's shadow sort of overcast as far as it goes. And so the problem that I see, especially when sort of inevitably it's compared to Kane, is just that what's his name? George is just not as interesting as Orson Welles walking around. And even though it all works thematically, I get stuck on the fact that I feel like he's just not really a character so much as this theme walking around. And unless you have someone who can sort of chew the scenery as much as Orson Welles, it's not quite as entertaining, even though it's easy to appreciate. So that's kind of I would apply that to the whole movie as far as my opinion goes. But it's very fun to watch.
All right. Talia, you're split down the middle. Huh?
It was split down the middle. I mean, because, again, I agree with Tom. You can see so much of Citizen Kane in this film. And I agree. George was the weakest link. I wanted to slap him because he was such a sissy. And I was like, oh, my God, grow some balls. It's like, but you know. But I think, you know what? If Orson Welles was in the movie, it would probably been a lot better.
Ooh. All right, we'll come back to that. Leah.
I agree with what Talia said about George. He's a whiny little shit. Just, oh my God. I did not like him at all. But no, so this is my first experience with this. And I have, I'm a child. I've never seen Citizen Kane either. So I don't quite have that to compare this to. But I did love the way it was shot. I thought it was shot beautifully. The sets and the dressings for the set, as well as the costumes and everything, were gorgeous. And it was a very pretty film. But it didn't really resonate with me at all. I don't know. And I don't know if it's just because I'm young and it just didn't do anything for me in that aspect. But no, it was okay. It was okay.
It was interesting.
It was interesting, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
So, Tom, are you asking for Orson Welles to play George, or you think it would be better if Welles played George? Because I don't know that he could do George.
Yeah, no, I don't think he could play George, but I mean, basically it's just, you have, and Kane, the character, is not very likable either. And so his downfall, you're kind of watching as well. And the thing that's different, though, is that Welles is just extremely entertaining to watch do anything. So him playing an unlikable or even not particularly interesting character becomes interesting because he's playing it, whereas you don't have that factor here. And so I think that works sort of to the detriment of how much fun it can be when you're actually watching it or sort of engaging with it. So I don't think Welles could have played George, but I don't know, I don't know if the character could have been played by someone who chews scenery more or just is bigger, but he's just so sort of reserved and one note the whole time. And I get why that works thematically, but it's just a little bit detrimental to the viewing experience.
Yeah. So Talia, I want you to chime in on this too, because you're the one who brought it up. You think Welles should have played George?
I mean, he probably would have done a better job than Tim Holt. I mean, Orson Welles is, again, I agree with Tom. He's so entertaining to watch because he was such an entertaining person and such an interesting person. I'm not too familiar with Tim Holt. I just looked him up on Wikipedia to find out who played George. I'm like, who is this actor? Because he was boring me. I didn't really find him interesting, but, and the fact that he was like a man child. I just, he really got on my nerves. And I'm thinking, right, if they chose someone else to play him, maybe it would have been better. But I mean, I don't know. It was 1942.
Well, even at the time, you're right. He was. Some critics did snipe his performance too, as being he was too rigid. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it works. I think it works. I think there is something there, and I like what you said because I wrote down: is George like the flip side of the coin from? Is George the flip side of the coin from Charles Foster Kane? I mean, they're both rich megalomaniacs who just plow over everyone to get what they want, no matter what the consequences are.
Yeah. I agree with
you. They're also both kind of like stuck in the past in that way too, and that's that's why I think as far as George goes, him being so rigid and stuck and almost wooden seems like it works in the sense that his character is literally stuck, will not progress. He's a man-child by choice, and that's sort of what grounds the nostalgia of the whole thing. It's just not as entertaining as Charles Foster Kane would. Wow. I think it's because we've seen Charles Foster Kane that makes it less entertaining than maybe even just watching it on its own. It's hard to judge it on its own merits.
So, and even though Charles Foster Kane is not a likable character, I was still with him the entire film. I was like, what's going to happen to him? I actually began to care for him, even though he was, a despicable person at one point. Yeah. So, sort of like the anti-hero. Yeah.
Yeah. Leah, did you hate George's performance too, or Tim Holt?
Well, I guess not. Maybe it's not the performance that I hated. Maybe it's just more of the character in general. But I felt no sympathy towards him. I didn't really care what happened to him at all, and so that might have been part of why I just didn't quite click. Why this movie didn't click with me. If I would have felt more of a connection to him or his character, I might have been a little bit more invested in it, but I did not feel anything. And I'm not sure if that was as much of the character, the way it was written. If it was played by somebody else, I feel like it would have been a different a different type of movie. I feel like he's supposed to be not as likable, but I don't know. It was.
Yeah, I don't think.
I mean, I thought the acting seemed. It seemed like he seemed like a good actor. It just seemed like the character is himself.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like we're promised this comeuppance at the very beginning, and his comeuppance is just not that satisfying. Ultimately,
you get hit by a car.
Yeah. Well, we know why that is. I mean, we can get into that later. I've got a ton of shit about that. But RKO took the movie away from him and re-edited it. So the downfall, they didn't want the downfall to be as harsh. I mean, Wells really wanted them to, just really go down. So, but they felt that was too bleak at the time. They wanted to be a little more upbeat, and they, even slapped on the super happy ending.
Yeah, it was the promise from the very beginning is sort of that it's going to be this brutal. I don't know, the downfall will be that brutal, and the fact that we don't get it almost just betrays what's so good about that first half and sort of what you're anticipating while you're watching it until it starts to take that turn. And so I think that makes, if this guy, I mean, if it was like the thing I go to as far as like the unlikable protagonist and you like watching him, the downfall is incredibly entertaining, would just be Barry Lyndon. And I love Barry Lyndon's downfall is brutal and it's so entertaining. This one,
I love Barry Lyndon. I love Barry Lyndon. Oh God, I could talk for hours about that.
Abe, let's just talk about Barry Lyndon.
Yeah. I knew that. I knew I'd lose control when she brought that up. Yeah. So no, really, but I mean, is George the protagonist, or is he the villain?
I think an anti-hero, maybe.
Is he?
I feel like he himself isn't necessarily the villain. It's almost just the way he was brought up and the world around him that has kind of turned him into this person and made him feel like he is entitled to certain things and whatnot. I don't know if he may be the villain to himself, but I don't know if that's. I don't know.
Tom?
Well, I mean, there's not a traditional like villain in terms of like a protagonist and antagonist so much as I think it seemed like Wells was positioning him just to be a guy who can't exist in that time. So as things are kind of getting more industrialized, there's not a place for that sort of old money sort of person in the world that Wells is painting. And so like the town is changing. He's not changing. He doesn't want to even get a job. He just wants to exist with, money. And that it seems like Wells is painting that as sort of the antagonist. The antagonist is like time passing in history rather than just him creating his own downfall necessarily, because that sort of guy probably could have thrived in certain circumstances. He's just not the ones that were given to him. Right.
No, I found that interesting too. George's entire existence is wrapped up in being and not doing. And and the new money comes and obliterates it. Okay, since we're on George, I want to stay with George. I got to ask, what the fuck does Lucy see in George? Why does Lucy keep coming back to George? I mean, I didn't see it. Leah, you can speak to perhaps bad matchups.
Wow.
Chris can talk to that too, maybe.
Thoughts, Chris?
I have no thoughts about that one.
I don't know what she sees in him. I didn't really have any sympathy for Lucy either. She just, I don't know if it was the way she was portrayed or just, I don't know. She just seemed like kind of this two-dimensional, typical, very stereotypical kind of, oh, Georgie kind of, woman and her, and the way that her and both poor Fanny. I mean, we're
saving Fanny to the last. Yeah.
All right. I'll tell. Well, I have thoughts on Fanny, but yeah. No, I don't know what. I think it might have been just the pressure of everyone else saying like, okay, you need to choose someone. But even then, she didn't. I don't know. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah.
No, she comes to George on her own terms at the end. She decides to go to him in the hospital.
Right, because she misses him and she felt bad.
Yeah,
but
and I disagree with you. I think Anne Baxter in that movie, she just radiates just so much energy and so much, I guess, just beauty and charm. I just really found her just to be a lot of fun on the screen. All right, so Talia, Lucy, shit all over this one now.
She just seemed like a ditz. The one scene that stood out for me is when George is telling her, I'll never see you again. I'm going to leave, you know, and he's like, you know, tearing out his heart. And she's like, well, I hope you have a great time, George. I really do. I'm like, is she mentally, you know, not all right upstairs? I mean, he's, you know, breaking down and she's just like, oh, whatever. I'm like, wow. They're completely mismatched. I didn't understand what he saw in her because I'm thinking he just kept, you know, what was it? He was like a doormat. And I'm thinking it's obvious. Really? And it's like, it's obvious she's not into you. So why do you keep pursuing her? Just leave it. Go to someone else. Is she the only woman, you know, in town? I mean, I just thought, wow, this is really, really pathetic.
Yeah. When Lucy did that, I got to say real quick, I said, that's a fucking pimp right there. God damn, she's awesome.
Well, yeah, I think it seems appropriate for his character to have like this one person who can be the only person that he loves, and it's got to be somebody that he fell in love with when he was younger, and it all has to be tied to this constant like stasis. Like he can't move forward ever in anything at any point. Which I feel like that's more of the issue than even attraction or interest in another person. Which I mean, I feel like that just goes into like why he's not really a character. He's just kind of this ball of themes, kind of walking around, like rolling around, and who's just like, okay,
around,
yeah,
sledding
fits,
around,
sledding,
yes,
sledding.
sledding
A time for sledding.
Yes. All right. Well, okay. Of all the trash you talked on Lucy, I think it all applies to Isabel doubly so. I don't know that Isabel's actually a real character. You know, in my mind, she's everything. All the she's the one that's just like, loosen up, lady. I mean, he got a little drunk and broke his bass fiddle. You know, that's it. You let that whole thing ruin your life. Just that one little incident. Some guy gets a little too drunk on your yard, and you go too far. So, any thoughts on Isabel? Anyone? Leah?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. She just. I think a lot of the lines we were kind of making fun of the way she would say them. Oh, Georgie.
Can we get Chris to do an impression of her?
Oh.
No.
We're not doing a Chris impersonation show today.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have 90 minutes.
He's trying to push that. He's trying to make it okay.
I can get Chris to storm out of the room.
Yeah.
It's true.
I'm almost at that point. Down in my own room, too.
That would be an accomplishment.
Talia, what'd you think of Isabel?
She was okay. Didn't really interest me. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my main focus was Georgie and Fanny, but I guess we'll talk about her later. Yeah.
Well, yeah. What you were asking about Lucy and George is what I was asking about Eugene and Isabel. Come on, Joseph Cotton, you can do better than this. I mean, you can have anybody. I didn't know what he saw in Isabel personally, but when they were together, it worked. I have to admit. So I just wanted to get to Eugene because obviously, in my mind, he is the movie, or next to Fanny, he's the whole movie. His whole the whole backdrop of him going through all the men's fashions right at the very beginning in that montage, as kind of setting up for how change is going to be paramount important through the whole movie, and he can roll with it more than anybody else can. But the best line Eugene's got is that whole, there aren't any old times, or when times are gone, they're not old, they're dead. There aren't any times but new times. I mean, goddamn, that's such a perfect little line of dialogue to set up the whole theme of the movie right there. That that Eugene doesn't believe in the old times or looking fondly back. It's looking forward the whole time. Of course, he's going to become George's, what do you call it, nemesis right there with that viewpoint.
Well, he is able to embody those themes while also being charismatic and interesting, which is, I think, what makes him. It's so much easier to watch him in a scene as opposed to our actual protagonist.
Anybody, Talia, what'd you think of Joseph Cotton and Eugene? Was there any thoughts on that?
He was actually interesting. Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because he wanted to go forward while Georgie wanted to stay in the past.
Yeah.
And on a side note, Georgie in some way reminded me of Jay Gatsby from The Great Gatsby. Always living in the past, didn't want to just face up and Daisy Buchanan doesn't love you anymore. She's moved on, but he's like, no, I got to stick with the past. And in some way, he reminded me of Jay Gatsby. Yeah, so.
Leah.
Yeah, I mean, Eugene kind of represents, I think, what most of the what everyone else was feeling at that time, like trying to, push forward and move forward the industrialization and cars and everything like that, and then putting that up against someone like Georgie. Yeah, it's just not gonna. I guess in that sense, if Georgie is the protagonist, he kind of is our antagonist, but maybe in more of a different way, where I was more rooting for him the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Rather than Georgie. And it was, yeah, like what Tom said, the charisma. He definitely has charisma, whereas I didn't think that Georgie had any.
Yeah, it's Joseph Cotton. He's one of the all times coolest guys. All right, now it's time to talk about Fanny, which is it's her movie in my mind.
Yeah.
I think Agnes Moorehead.
Fanny time.
Yeah. There you go. Despite what RKO did to the movie, which, we can get into that in just a second. But, Fanny, she's the most tragic freaking character in the whole movie in my mind. She's the one she's the one standing right there in front of the man she loves and just being completely ignored the entire time. Just brutal. And of course, everybody just keeps snipping at her the whole time. Interestingly enough, Agnes Moorehead's performance in that initial test screening that really kind of sealed this movie's fate was actually heckled and laughed at by some of the test screen audience members. So they reshot some stuff with her, pulling it back a little bit. This is actually Agnes Moorehead pulling it back in some of the scenes, like the boiler scene. Yeah. So, I mean, Tom, what do you think? Was this a nuanced performance?
No, but it's not a very nuanced. Well, it's kind of a nuanced movie in some ways, but not on a performance level. I wouldn't say in general. Certainly not that one.
Yeah. So, what'd you think of old Fanny?
I think it's useful to have that much energy around, but as a character, I don't know. It's a wonderful characterization, or also not very satisfying by the time you get to the ending. And it's like that's one of the things I think you take away. We're kind of expecting maybe that's building to something, all that energy, and it doesn't. Just like most of the movie.
Yeah, it is. RKO really fucked it. Talia, Agnes Moorehead, what do you think?
Yes. I was surprised that it was the actress was the woman that played the mother in Bewitched. I was like, that's her?
Yes.
I love Bewitched, but really I do. And I liked her character the most. But with Fanny, I love the scene on the stairs where she's trying to manipulate George. I thought, wow, that's the best acting, with a scene with George, and I was like, wow, now I'm interested. But it was all because of her. He was just, in some ways overacting, but she was just so authentic. I was like, wow, why can't the movie just be mostly about her? I care more about Fanny now. I felt sorry for her. Yeah, it really sucked for her.
It did. Leah.
Yeah, there was one line, I think the Isabel's brother had, or his uncle, poor Fanny, she doesn't have anything. I'm just like, oh, poor Fanny. But no, I did love that the scene on the stairs. I thought I was like, is either George gonna throw her down the stairs, or is she gonna throw herself down the stairs? I was kind of low key hoping for that. But I mean, yeah, when she throws herself up against that boiler and it's not hot, it's cold. She just, I mean, you can't help but laugh because, I mean, especially, for now and for today's audience, it's a different style of acting than what we're used to seeing. And it is over dramatic. It is kind of melodramatic and like kind of overacting-ish. But I mean, for her, she was obviously it's not necessarily bad acting for her because she was obviously feeling it and getting into it. She did a good job with it. It's just a different style than what we see today, but we can still appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do appreciate it. I really enjoyed Fanny's performance a lot in this movie. I really, really enjoyed it. And you're right. It's RKO that screwed us over. We can talk about that just a little bit, but one of the things they did was Fanny's like, redemption happens like this. Just wham bam. She's back to being normal and apologizing to George almost instantly, or trying to mend the fences, which I found to be a really big misstep. And then the goddamn hospital scene. Fanny, as it was originally shot by Welles, Fanny's in that boarding helm. That's where Eugene goes to see her after the accident. She's hanging out with all these old spinsters and just miserable and alone. And she's sitting in her rocking chair going back and forth. And if you actually look at the trailer for Magnificent Ambersons, you can see this. She's sitting in a rocking chair going back and forth while Eugene is talking about honoring, finally his love, love of Isabel. Just completely ignoring Fanny. Just even right there until the very end. Just giving Fanny the middle finger.
I feel like that's what the movie, it needs that brutality.
Yeah, it does.
To be satisfying at the end. That was the right instinct.
Yeah. Trying to find the exact moment here. Screw it. I mean, they did cut out so much things. 45 minutes. Wells would have cut some out too. What people talk about, that 133 minutes, is just a rough cut of the movie. Wells was still going to edit it down, but Wells went to South America to work on a documentary. RKO, after the test screening, decided they were going to take over, and they reshot the ending. They edited it out. They didn't use hacks necessarily. They had Robert Wise, Sound of Music. What else did he do? Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Robert Wise was not exactly a nobody, and so he got to work on it too. So
he's no Joss Whedon when it comes to reshoots.
Yeah, right. So yeah, RKO did take it over. This is one of the first instances, really, of a movie just studio stepping in and just obliterating the director's vision. So yeah, that second half is where they did the most amount of damage, and I think it shows, doesn't it? That second half is definitely not as strong as the first. Would we agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
It just doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
In the second half.
It limps home. Yeah.
Yeah. It continues going and then it ends at some point.
Like I was waiting for something significant to happen or something like that, and then it just didn't.
It was. Yeah.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Yeah, because Orson Welles, he just got off of doing Citizen Kane before he did this movie, and I'm thinking, okay, when you have something that big, that successful, you have a bit of power. So why did they take the power from Orson Welles? I thought, okay, now you're the golden boy, you're the golden child. What's your next project? Anything you want? That's how it usually works in Hollywood. If you win an Oscar or you make, $500 million at the box office, the next film, okay, you can do whatever you want. Why did they chop this into just bullshit? Really?
Well, first off, there was a test screening for this movie, and it did very, very poorly with the audience. It was in Pomona, I think it was, the test screening. Also, Kane was not a financial success. It took a long time for Kane to make its money back. As far as having carte blanche to do whatever you want, that's how they lured Kane to Hollywood. And by most accounts, a lot of people resented Orson Welles for, just the new kid. The 25-year-old kid walks into Hollywood and does whatever he wants. And you may or may not believe this about Orson Welles. He didn't really do things humbly. He came in, he was a little loud, a little brash, and that's what happened. Right or wrong. Okay. Yeah.
He got too big for his britches, basically.
Well, yeah, right. He's the one that said, I heard that I was a prodigy for so long when I was a kid. It took me till I was like 40 to realize it was untrue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But that's it. There's 44 minutes of this movie that have been cut out that we'll never see. If anybody's read anything about this, everybody knows exactly what it is. They cut it to the bone. And I was even wondering, maybe you guys can chime in on this too. I was even wondering in the beginning, because it seems like that beginning is lightning fast, the way they're trying to introduce everybody. Was that too fast?
For me, it's quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It doesn't matter.
I was just gonna say, I think I like it because it's almost a little too fast, but you get a basic introduction, and then when you come back to the characters, it slows down after that first the first introduction goes fast, but it gives you a little sense of who you're getting into, and so you kind of know what you're going to expect, but you don't have to fully understand it right away. So I liked that, even though it was maybe it's too fast, but it works, I think.
Yeah, Talia, what were you going to say?
No, I was saying, yeah, it was a bit too fast, but with all that was been cut, I think maybe they just wanted to just shorten the time on it. But I thought it probably would have been a little bit better if you had a little bit more introduction. So because this is supposed to be this, I thought it's supposed to be this saga and so I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a long, so let me really get into it. But I'm like, okay, that was pretty short, the introduction. I'm like, all right, so now just right into the movie, right into these characters. I'm like, okay, where are we going to go with these characters? And it just seemed like, really like take me on a journey. And that's what a saga does. And this didn't really, it took me like on a short weekend break, basically, I was like, okay, something doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Leah, did you feel like it was too fast, or did you feel like it was a saga? Or?
I mean, I almost would have liked more of a timeline, more at the beginning and then more kind of towards the end, because I thought it was interesting, and I would have appreciated it if it would have told it a little bit, talked a little bit about more of each of the characters, because I was confused when we finally got to the present or whatever, and I wasn't quite sure who the people were or what their connections were to the characters that we just saw.
In that scene at the first party, the first ball, Orson Welles worked on one long continuous shot that floated through the party, and they did edit it up so it would move faster. They cut the long continuous take out of the movie.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's definitely momentum though.
Yeah, no, it's moving forward. Is it moving forward too fast?
When you have that second half where it sort of just stops moving, then you really notice it. So I guess maybe it's because I watched the whole thing all the way through, but it's maybe a little hard to keep up at sometimes, but the momentum is interesting and it's entertaining when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. But Leah, you weren't entertained or interested though. You were.
I don't know what's wrong with me. I wasn't.
It's okay. It's okay. It's not for everybody. But you need to get a horse or dry up.
I know.
Tom, you're a little bit more versed in the language. Do you know much about the slang? Was that period authentic? Do you have any idea?
I haven't studied the slang from this particular
1890?
period. No. It's probably taken from the book, would be my guess.
I was wondering if an audience. I was wondering how it would feel on the ears to an audience in the 1940s as opposed to 2017. I mean, do you think it was just out of place to them too?
Probably to some extent, but I don't know, at that point you might even have like old relatives that you knew who said some of that slang. So I don't know. Also, we didn't know everybody's slang probably at that point because we didn't have the internet where we could read everybody's comments or anything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
holy cow!
I don't know.
About that.
Probably just we're used to not understanding slang more than we are. Now we're like, what? What does that mean?
George would have been against the internet. George would have George would not have let them become Facebook friends. He would have blocked that.
Yeah, you'd be against Skype too, Instagram, cellular phone, television, everything.
Yeah, this movie's rife for a remake with modern sensibilities. Yeah. Eugene gets drunk and sends a dick pic on accident to Isabel.
Yeah. See, I would actually watch a movie like that. I would watch it.
We'll write it. Sounds interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered everything I wanted to cover specifically. It's just we could go through point by point of every cut they made, but that would take forever. That's pretty much it. If we wanted to start wrapping it up, we can. Tom, give me your thumbnail, your overall kind of view.
I feel like I've said that like 4 times already. I mean,
Repeat
really.
it.
Okay. I think it's an interesting movie. I think it's entertaining. I do like it for the most part. I like watching. I think Orson Welles' eye for how to shoot things is just interesting. So I have no problem sitting down to watch this movie, but I don't think it's particularly fun along the way because of sort of some of the things we've talked about, where it seems like it's maybe a little more complicated and thematic than Citizen Kane in some ways, but because it's a little less bold and doesn't push itself in the same way, it's maybe not as entertaining or compelling. But I enjoy it, and rewatching it every few years is probably enough for me. So it's basically a thumbs up.
Do you have a favorite shot, a favorite scene?
The dance, I really love the dance. I like anytime they go by the staircases. I think it always looks beautiful. Whenever he pulls away, I think I really like his wide shots, even though his close-ups are really good as well. But I don't know if there's a favorite necessarily. It's just, it flows well, and it's nice to watch the whole time.
All right, Talia, let's give me your final wrap up. Would you recommend it to anybody?
If you're a fan of Orson Welles, or if you are a classic film buff, definitely see it. two scenes stuck out for me that I really liked was when they were talking about the cars and the automobile industry and how it's going to, like 20 years from now, it's going to be like this. And I'm thinking, wow, what a way to predict the future. I mean, really. And no, seriously, I was like, that's really, innovative. But the other scene was with Fanny on the staircase. I love that. I'm thinking of doing that for a monologue, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Because I really love that. I was like, wow, she is really playing him. And he's too dumb to know it.
I don't know if he's too dumb or if just people want to hear what they want to hear, and Fanny's just there confirming every suspicion he has. That's what he wants to hear.
But that's what I mean by man-child. It's like grow up, mature, move up. Can you not tell that someone is lying to you like blatantly? And you just like, oh, I don't believe it. I'm like, oh boy, okay. But I really like that scene. That was a really good scene. Fantastic. I would say, 5 out of 10. And definitely, if you're an Orson Welles fan, definitely see it.
All right.
Yep.
I think we know what you would think, Leah. You're not going to recommend this to anybody.
Well, I mean, if you're a fan of Orson Welles, like Talia said, and I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. It just didn't connect well with me, and maybe that's just. Maybe I'll watch it again in like 10, 20 years, and I'll be like, this movie's fantastic. This is great. So I'm not completely ruling it out. It's just not for me right now. I probably would have appreciated the darker ending. I probably would have really enjoyed that. And I mean, as far as shots go, one of the shot that has been in my mind is when they're in the winter and they're on the carriage. It's the carriage going by the car as the people are trying to get the car started, and they're in their carriage, and then they fall out and roll together in the snow. I thought that was a kind of funny but beautifully shot scene as they're going through the woods. I liked the look of that one.
That's George's move. He's done that before. Yeah, that's his go-to move. tip the sled. I think my favorite scene in the whole movie is after the party's over, after Eugene has left and George is just storming about the house, wanting to know who this Morgan fellow is, and his dad kind of has indifference towards him. Wilbur, I guess he kind of has indifference towards everybody. And then his mom says, I'll tuck you in. And she closes the door, leaving him completely like just in shadow. I mean, that's so Orson Welles right there. And then he uses the deep focus, and Fanny's right there, way back in the corner, just way out of there. And Fanny starts talking just to give you just such a... Orson Welles can just use composition better than just so many people. I mean, there's Fanny, just little old Fanny back there. I just love that moment right there. It just really sets everything up so well. And yes, I would recommend it. I think I think the people that say that it's better than Kane are probably a little bit off base, and I don't know.
Hipsters.
Yeah, hipsters. What are you going to do? But I would definitely recommend it to anybody. And I don't know if it's. I still think Orson Welles was probably a little more confident in his abilities than he was in Kane. He didn't feel the need to go overboard. He could pull it in a little bit.
I have a question for you, Abe. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Talia, you get to talk. Dan and Marty aren't on the show. Okay. You get to talk all you want.
No, when it comes to Orson Welles, do you think that he is the greatest filmmaker?
He's like the greatest that never was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he legitimately made two movies inside the studio, and then he's got dozens of projects that in varying stages of completion his whole life. Mm-hmm. It's too bad. Yeah. I don't know if it was a lack of focus on his part or just, he was always hunting financing. I did read a little interview with him saying that he felt it was easier to work inside the studios. After the studios kind of died down and the independents started to come in, he found he couldn't work with independent films at all. At all. The studios were easier for him to work with. So take that for what it's worth. Tom, you were saying something?
I was saying, I think his confidence in the sense that he didn't feel the need to show off quite as much might have been to this film's detriment, though, as opposed to, in comparison to Kane.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, maybe if this one was more stylish, it would have had that energy to sustain itself as it went on, or maybe just the original cut had it all. I don't know, but the fact that Kane is constantly showing off, the fact that Welles, as an actor, as a director, as a writer, was just showing off every step of the way, makes that incredibly entertaining and compelling in a way that this one, it's like a soft-spoken version, which it shows, I think.
Okay.
Maybe in a bad way.
I think it's Kane hitting on all cylinders, though. I think he's using. I mean, obviously in the narration, he's using his radio influence, and I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's Kane hitting on all cylinders, and what you call like reserved. I'm calling confidence. 6 of one, half dozen of another, perhaps, but I don't know. It's a melodrama. That's it. If you're in a mood for a nice old melodrama, I don't think you're going to do any better than this.
Yeah.
That's all I got. I guess Dan and Marty will be back to talk about some comic book something or other next week.
What, Abe? If you come back, we could talk about Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, we may have to do that sometime.
We could do a whole Wells
Very
retrospective too.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Stanley Kubrick.
Ooh.
I,
Be cool.
Barry Lyndon.
yeah, there we go. I knew that was coming. I wouldn't get a word in edgewise between you two. All right, everybody. That's it for the movies and stuff show. Anybody doing anything that we need to make, our 2 people that are watching aware of? Tom, you've got a short film on YouTube, don't you?
Yeah, Leah's in it too.
Leah's in it.
Chris's snakes are in it. Yeah, it's called The Nuanced Side. It's on YouTube.
I'll show up for this part.
Yeah,
there we go.
Okay,
There we go.
yeah. Maybe Leah can.
We
I
can bring
co-wrote
the
it with
snake-
Leah. She can pitch it.
Pitch it.
Chris, shut up. I'm trying to talk. Hey, yeah, Leah, you want to pitch the movie?
It's called The Nuanced Side, and Tom and I wrote it about a year ago. It's a short film that we filmed this past summer. Put it in the Prairie Lakes Film Festival. It premiered there in Omaha. We're just kidding. That was in Grand Island. But it's basically about Pepper Swanson. She is it's the main character. I played Pepper, and she's a podcast hoster, and she's hosting a podcast with Congressman Fargo.
Councilman, technically.
Council. Oh, that's right. Sorry, Councilman. And it
Spoilers.
and things go a little bit awry when she runs into someone from her past at the coffee shop. So
Who works for the mainstream media?
Oh.
snake oil salesman.
Yeah, so that's on YouTube. It's called The Nuanced Side. It's up there now.
Talia, when are you going to hit it big in the theater or the movies? When are we going to see you taking on some super villain in a comic book movie?
Ooh.
Oh, I was going to go to Harvey Weinstein, but he's, maybe J.J. Abrams,
There you go.
maybe David Fincher. They seem to be safe for now this week. Every week it seems like it's a new person. So I don't know. I'm sort of like, please don't molest me. I just want to act.
Trying to act here.
Oh, Lord. And for those of you that don't know, we're over on Pop Axis as well. The Supernauts is no more. Pop Axis is the place where we're hanging out. Tom shows up sporadically to harass everybody. Not in that way. Not in that way, but...
Yeah, now that sounds really bad.
Oh, God.
Badger. We'll say badger, not harass.
I show up to Badger. Well, now Badger sounds weird.
Well, what? Okay, come on.
I don't know. We need some old-timey slang or something.
You're a would-be dude.
Yes.
All right, everybody, popaxis.com, and I'm not doing anything, so that's it. We're out. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.